Donovan Mitchell does not go to the New York Knicks. He does not go to the Washington Wizards, but he also doesn't go to the Charlotte Hornets. That and much more. I'm joined by David Walker, getting the old crew back together here on Locked On Hornets.
Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It is Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and daily wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. I'm Doug Branson. You can catch more of my work on Every Hornets Boxscore at everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm joined by one of the original members of Locked On Hornets, David Walker, who is filling in for Walker Mail. David, I'm going to do my best not to call you Walker. It always gets a little confusing nowadays when you take over for Walker because your last name is Walker and I have a baby and I didn't sleep much last night.
Sure. I'll go by either one. It's totally fine. I can only hope to just fill in for Walker. It's a tough job, but I'm going to give it my best. It's a little rusty, but these early Fridays are feeling good.
Oh, well, and we have some news to talk about. When I knew you were coming on the show, I thought, well, we're going to have to fish around for some topics, but Donovan Mitchell gets traded. That landed right in our lap. Unfortunately, Donovan Mitchell himself did not land in the Charlotte Hornets lap. Instead, he's going to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let me just read off what Cleveland was able to use to acquire Donovan. Snuck in there because he was supposed to go to the New York Knicks. Charlotte was in the conversation. Washington was in the conversation. Cleveland, I never heard about Cleveland being in this conversation, David.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes. But here's what Cleveland sent to the Jazz. They sent Lauri Markkanen. They sent Ochai Agbaji, who was the 14th pick in this past draft. Remember, he was drafted in between the Hornets' 13th and 15th pick. Guard Colin Sexton, who signed a 4-year, $72 million sign and trade as part of this deal. They sent 3 unprotected first-round picks, 2025, 2027, 2029. David, 1 year you didn't hear in there is 2024. I don't know if you know who's coming out in 2024, David.
Is that Bronny?
Bronny James. Okay.
Nobody's giving up those picks, baby. Nobody's
giving up that pick. And think, if Cleveland's winning, they're probably late first round. That's Bronny's like ceiling right now is late first round. You would be reaching for LeBron James if you took Bronny James in the late first round. So a lot of conspiracy theory around that.
Yeah, just one thing there. I need the James family. They've got to demand a first round pick at this point. The hype's gotten too much. They've got to say first round or bust.
Well, first round or LeBron doesn't come. Like either draft my kid first round. I mean, the demand.
That's an easy backpedal. That's an easy backpedal for LeBron. He's done much more skillful backpedaling than that. That's an easy one.
Okay, they give up 3 unprotected first-round picks. They give up 2 pick swaps in 2026 and 2028. So, David, we always knew that the haul to get Donovan Mitchell was going to be very large. Does this trade by Cleveland indicate to you that the haul would have been too large for the Hornets to actually offer and acquire Donovan Mitchell?
It certainly would appear so. I mean, certainly for the Hornets, you got to think they didn't want to give up the future assets, I guess. I'm trying to figure out what the centerpiece. I mean, I'm thinking Sexton is the centerpiece player, right? I mean, that's where we have to land. He's signing with the Utah Jazz. He's a young up-and-comer. He certainly would have been more attractive, I think, than anyone the Hornets could have put in there. You have to think PJ Washington, some combo of Terry, Hayward, something. I'm sure they have explored all angles. LaMelo, we know, is off limits. Bridges, we know, is out of the conversation as well. So when they're talking about actual assets, they would have had to basically give up a big piece of their entire team. The Hornets did. The Cavs really didn't have to do that. It put them in a little position of power. They have an identity. They really didn't affect that identity or that core by making any of these moves, at least in the short term. So I think if the Hornets were involved in that conversation, we know that Ainge asks for a lot, right? It was too much for the Knicks. I mean, they were at the doorstep and it was too much for them. So you got to think it was too much for the Hornets, whatever, however far that got down the line.
I mean, I speculated all along in this process that the team that would beat the Charlotte Hornets to Donovan Mitchell, that it would be less about the picks that they could offer over the Hornets and more about the players that they could offer. And not that Utah, a rebuilding team, would be looking for, legitimate all-stars. But as you're rebuilding the team, it's nice to have some cornerstone pieces that then you can build around as the years progress. And that's what Colin Sexton represents, despite not playing a lot of games because of a torn meniscus last season. I think Colin Sexton projects out to be a really, really good guard that you could build around and replace some of what you're letting go with Donovan Mitchell. And then Lauri Markkanen is a role player. The Hornets could have matched that, I think. But the thing that really set me off yesterday on Twitter was the idea that part of this deal was Ochai Agbaji, who was drafted 14th. And it got me thinking, what if, I'm trying to go into some of these conversations that we know the Hornets have had. As far back as Summer League, we had reports that Charlotte was in the conversation for Donovan Mitchell with Utah as Utah was really seriously exploring the deal with the Knicks. And I said that, that Charlotte would be used as bait as, hey, New York, let's get a deal done. And the only way Charlotte was going to get this deal done is a total surprise, just like Cleveland. But apparently Cleveland was able to re-engage and get this deal done, and Charlotte wasn't. And I look at that pick, and David, I remember back in the NBA draft, and I remember, Charlotte had 2 picks. They had the 13th pick. They had the 15th pick. They used the 15th pick on Mark Williams. Now, maybe they don't want to give up on Mark Williams. Maybe that was a hindrance to getting a deal done because they feel like Mark Williams can finally solve the thing that they've needed to solve for a long time, which is having an anchor big. Fine. But they traded the 13th pick for a considerably worse first-round future pick. Had they just made the 13th pick and signed that player, they could have possibly used that player as leverage in this deal. And it just makes me go crazy because I just don't know why, as a franchise, other than pure monetary considerations of not wanting to sign a second first-round pick, I don't know why you wouldn't even just hold on to that first-rounder, make the selection, and then try to leverage that as the deal. Does that not make you crazy?
It made me crazy a little bit on draft night. I mean, I'm pretty sure I defended it at some point along the way, but I still would have taken both those players and kept them. And I get the argument on the other side that you don't want to have that competition. You don't want to have the uncertainty or the doubt or whatever. But to me, that's 2 young assets that you can kind of work with and see what happens because you have nothing in the post. Okay. So that's part of the story. Now let me clarify something here, Doug. Like if they would have tried, they could not have turned around and traded that pick, correct? I mean, isn't that a rule? Like say they had tried to package that pick, that the future pick they got and through this Durant trade, they couldn't have included that in the trade yet. Am I imagining some
I don't believe so. I'm not a CBA expert. I don't, but here's the
Bobby
thing.
Marks.
Yeah, go talk to Bobby Marks. I'm not an expert on the CBA, but I'll tell you this. I said this all along, that the Hornets picks were more valuable than some of these other teams' picks because, the Hornets actually have a potential to mess all of this up. It's not like Cleveland's picks are going to be, they've already got 2 all-stars on the team in Garland and Jared Allen. They've got Evan Mobley, who seems, he's going to be all NBA at some point if they keep the center position at all NBA.
Well, Woj confirmed that. He said future all-star in his tweet.
How did Evan Mobley's agent has to be involved somewhere? Like how did Evan Mobley sneak in like this drive-by compliment?
He said
by
now
Woj
they've got
in the
2
report?
all-stars and 1 future all-star. No one's arguing.
I kind of agree in the sense that if they keep the center position, Evan Mobley seems destined to be one of the best centers in the NBA, barring injury. So they've got all those pieces. So those Cleveland picks are not going to be great. Yeah, the pick swaps are not going to be great. Right. Whereas the Hornets picks, even if you got 1 less, would probably be, if you were thinking about it, slightly more valuable than some of these other picks. So I thought it was all going to come down to players. But it wasn't about Ochai Agbaji as a player. It was about the idea that you get a player that's on a rookie scale contract that is very affordable, that you can then, 3 years down the line, Agbaji is still contributing for your team. but not hurting your books, so that then you can go and make the moves to build around Colin Sexton and try to turn the Jazz into a contender again. That's what the 13th pick could have been for the Hornets.
Well, this to me is another indication of, call it what you want, call it not being prepared, call it not being nimble enough or quick enough or reactive enough or whatever. I mean, we kind of saw it on draft night. They didn't think both those guys were going to be there. And I don't think they really knew what to do. I mean, I'm assuming they had that scenario planned out, but they couldn't get a deal worked out, prior to the draft with both of them or some big move. Some big move, Doug. I think that's what we're looking for here. You've got LaMelo.
Something
they need to do something, and it just feels like they stick their toe in the water, right? And they're feeling around. They're in the conversations, but either it gets to the point of no return and they back off, or they don't know how far to push it. And whatever the reason, it's not happening. I mean, whatever the buildup, whatever's leading up to this, it's not happening. It feels like they may not have a roadmap. I don't know. To me,
okay.
I mean, that's what this feels like.
That's what I want to talk about in the second segment. Sort of what are the implications of not doing anything this offseason? I want to get more of your thoughts, David. You haven't been around in a while. Just want to see where your head's at on this upcoming season. We'll talk about that. Also, Steph Curry's name in the news. He gets a key to the city. Had some interesting thoughts about possibly playing for the Charlotte Hornets in the future. I want to talk about that. Later in the show, some exciting news around the G League. We don't get much exciting news around the G League unless it involves Kai Jones or James Bouknight. There is some exciting news around the G League rule changes that could possibly be coming to the NBA. Want to talk about that as well. But first, are you one of those people that thinks it's okay to drive stoned? Well, that's the worst that can happen. You say you end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but also everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. More Locked On Hornets coming up.
You are listening to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Thoughts on the news about Cody Zeller's injury?
That's a tough one, man. I mean, what the doing, dude?
He's just injured, man. It's okay.
It's
Look,
just, he's
injuries
just having to deal with an
happen.
injury.
He didn't want to get injured, okay, David? But
sorry, guys. I just had someone jump out in front of my vehicle. That was understandable.
Only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I just like, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
If I may.
Yeah, sure. So you can't say, hold on. You can't start talking and then say, if I may. Like, yes, you obviously may. You started talking.
If I may. The read and then the drop have nothing to do with each other. I just want to clarify that. The read you had prior to the drop and
right.
the classic drop
right.
of me in my vehicle, those were unrelated.
Right. You were sober. You were perfectly.
Yeah, totally.
It was you're always blaming the
podcast.
Kids. You're not taking any. This is David's character, by the way. He never takes personal responsibility. He always just blames children for his problems. Oh wait, that's my character. All right, David Walker joining me on the show. He's filling in for Walker Mail, who is on some vacay. David, you haven't been around in a while because you've been on some vacay. You've been loving some beach time. You look good. You got a good tan going on.
Oh, thanks,
looking fresh, looking rejuvenated.
Well, school's back in, so there's the stress level has gone slightly down.
Yeah, see, I don't know that world yet. So you have to give me a little bit of a window later on. But first, I want to continue this conversation around Donovan Mitchell going to the Cavaliers, not going to the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets, the only move they've made they've made two moves this offseason. One was to extend the qualifying offer to Miles Bridges, but all of that is in jeopardy, limbo, as Miles Bridges is facing felony domestic violence charges in Los Angeles. We should get some kind of update on that situation next week. There's a court date scheduled for September 7th. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you can get the updates on that. The only other move they've made is re-signing Cody Martin to the team, which I think was an important move around the margins, but certainly not something that's going to significantly change their outlook. And that's what disappoints me most, David, about this situation, is that acquiring Donovan Mitchell would have significantly closed the gap in talent between the Charlotte Hornets and every other team in the Eastern Conference. It seems like every single team has made some kind of move to get better, and the Hornets have essentially done nothing. And they have, I think Vegas indicates this, they have gotten worse than they were last season. And I don't know what fans are supposed to do with that, because as a fan, you see, hey, the team has LaMelo Ball. They struck gold. This guy's already an all-star in his second year. He could possibly be in the all-NBA conversation this coming season, and certainly in that conversation 2 seasons from now. And yet the team seems to be slow-footing contention. I just don't know what you're supposed to do with that as a fan.
Yeah, you add Donovan Mitchell to the backcourt with LaMelo. That's what you start. I mean, that's where you start to build. That's 2 all-stars. That gets you into the playoffs, I think. We shouldn't skip over the whole Miles Bridges thing. Obviously, that has stuck them, right? Obviously, that was not of their doing. It's the reason they're so high or low, however you want to put it, on the worst offseason rankings that you guys discussed a couple of shows ago. But I don't think they were going to do a whole lot else regardless. I mean, they kind of said as much. Miles was their big move to be made and to secure in the offseason. They weren't going to make a lot of changes. They were hoping to solve the center position in the draft. And so, every time you come around and look at what this team and what this front office is doing, there's always kind of that excuse there, but I don't think their plan was to do a big shakeup. Can you blame them for that? Could you see Miles blossoming and taking another step to being an all-star? Possibly, but when things shift, they don't appear to have a plan B if they have a plan A. And it's this type of move, you're right, that they have to do, right? They've got to swoop in, find the disgruntled star, find the star that's in a bad situation because of where they are and who they are, right? They have to do that. They're not going to get somebody like that on the free agent market.
Well, and so bringing this back to Donovan Mitchell, this was their opportunity.
Right.
And I don't get the sense, unless, hey, if I'm the Charlotte front office right now, I need to leak something that said, hey, we gave them, pull a Danny Ainge here and say, hey, we made them a Godfather offer. We made them a huge offer, and Cleveland's offer was just significantly better. Leak that out. Let some fans know. That's to me, this is as much about optics as it is basketball. This is about an organization going to their fans and saying, we love you, and we're trying, Jennifer. Like, we're trying to put a product out on the floor, because what's worse than hate? Love and hate. What's worse than hate? What's
apathy.
Worse than hate? Apathy, indifference. And that is the feeling that I'm getting from this front office right now. It's all about excuses. If it was a couple of years ago, we heard, well, this team doesn't have any all-stars. And then it was this past period right after the season where Mitch Kupchak essentially said, we don't know if we're ready to contend. He didn't say like a Cleveland, but Cleveland is an example of a team that had a couple of all-stars and were ready to sort of make that move into Eastern Conference contention. So he's saying, well, this team is not ready to make those kind of moves. Well, when will they be ready? And how do you get ready? I get it. Doug, I understand that there were things outside of their control. Although I would argue that they let the qualifying offer on Miles Bridges stick. They could have rescinded the qualifying offer and completely changed gears on the offseason. They let this entire offseason move along with that situation, carried into it.
Yeah. And we don't know what's been put forth down from the league, right? Like I think there's essentially a no discussion clause across media, teams, league.
This isn't about discussion. This is
right.
What I'm saying is and again, we have to figure out if it's going to be a lot of hindsight going back and looking at it and say, well, that looks good in hindsight, them holding on to that qualifying offer. But what I'm saying is that's their choice.
That's a choice. That's a move. Right. And we haven't heard anything on it. And I'll tell you what's doubly frustrating when you don't hear anything from the front office except, around media day or trade deadline or whatever. You go the whole offseason, all this stuff happens. But who you do hear from, Doug? You know who I hear from?
Who?
The ticket sales office. That's who I hear from. You know what they tell me? Apparently,
What do they tell you?
Your lack of interest indicates a lack of interest.
Well,
And you know what, Megan? It does. I mean, look, I'm just saying, it's frustrating because, Doug, we have been doing this show since the Bobcat days, okay? A lot of these folks watching and listening have been with us for that long. And I think we've been a proponent of, hey, let's don't rush it. Don't get out over your skis too much. Wait till you've got something to build upon and then go build and make moves.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you have got to throw some of that out the window and say, all right, we're going to take a swing here. We're going to try this. And it's not going to be a Dwight Howard swing. It's not going to be your Al Jefferson free agent swing. It's going to be an actual swing where you make moves, you shake things up. And I understand they're trying to build, but look at that East, Doug. I mean, my God, the two teams we talked about, the Cavs and the Knicks, they may be in 7-8 spot. I mean, they may be in the play-in game. So, I mean, that's what you're fighting uphill against now. And to position this upcoming season, the third with LaMelo Ball, as a gap year is just awful PR for one. So you got to do something to counteract that. But it is just a horrible way to spend the next 12 months of basketball until you can get to the next offseason. I mean, it's just, what are they going to do? Where are they going? No one knows, and they haven't told us. Well, and this is about as negative as I get. Like, I swear I come on here and I'm super negative. I feel like I'm defending them otherwise out on Twitter. But when you look at it, it's tough.
Well, I think, and how does LaMelo Ball view all of this? I think is an interesting question, because for him and the accolades that he can acquire, those will have a ceiling on them if the team doesn't win. It's going to be very difficult for him to get into the All-NBA conversation if this team is not winning. And I don't know that LaMelo Ball can. Maybe he can take some of these pieces and raise their level of play just via him. Maybe he had. I don't know that. We've seen only a few players in NBA history be able to really take a team that lacked significant talent and move them into contention. Maybe LaMelo Ball is capable of that, but I think more likely is that he needs a few pieces around him to fully realize a lot of the things that he wants to realize in his NBA career, and the Hornets are not providing that. And if the Hornets aren't going to provide that this year or next year or the next year, what's going to happen? I've said it a lot. I think the Hornets need to be waking up every morning thinking about what can we do to convince LaMelo Ball that this team is serious about not making the playoffs, not making the play-in, not winning a play-in game, not winning a first-round series. Is this team serious about competing in the Eastern Conference, about getting to the finals and winning a championship? That's how Milwaukee convinced Giannis to hang around. Giannis won them a championship. That has to be the goal for the Charlotte Hornets. And it doesn't, at this moment, feel like that there's that seriousness around it. Really quickly, Steph Curry got the key to the city of Charlotte. Of course, spent 21 years of his life there. Went to college at Davidson, was a star there, and is sort of a legend of Charlotte. Wasn't born there, but certainly spent a lot of his time in Charlotte. A favorite son of Charlotte.
Have you ever seen a one-man commencement ceremony like that before?
It was odd.
He had his cap and gown on, but maybe some other folks, faculty members on the stage. I get it. Look, Steph's a big deal. It did take him 13 years. I mean, come on, guys. A lot of people say, God.
A lot of summer classes.
I know. That was pretty cool, though. But yeah, so you were saying he got the key to the city as well.
He got the key to, which I don't know what that means. I don't know what is that open.
Well, his dad also has it, so why couldn't he just let him borrow his, I guess?
Well, they're printing too many keys then, because I think Thomas Davis has one as well. It's a lot of keys hanging around. It seems like a security issue of some kind. I don't know what it opens. It seems like a security.
My door, Walker's door. You're safe, geez. But everyone else, I mean, geez.
That's right. Steph Curry is going to bust into your house. So the more interesting part of the story, though, is that Steph Curry mentions that other than the Warriors, he couldn't envision himself, I guess, playing for any other team except for Charlotte. And he said he was very careful to say, I'm not breaking any news here. I'm very dedicated to the Golden State Warriors. But he mentions the Charlotte Hornets. He mentions any mention of a desire to play for this franchise is going to have fans' ears perking up. David, I'm just going to ask this and then we can move on. Based on what he said there, is there any chance that Steph Curry ever dons the teal and purple in your mind?
Oh, man. No.
Come on. Not zero chance. You're putting it at zero?
No way. I mean, he's Mr. Warrior at this point. He's too entrenched. I just
you don't see like a 1 year kind of, not a serious run with the Charlotte Hornets, but a 1 year. All right, I'm gonna just wrap up my career here in Charlotte. Have some ceremonies with my dad. Dap him up, you know.
They do like ceremonies. So okay, 5%.
Yeah,
chance.
Woo! 5% chance from David Walker. I could see it. I mean, stranger things have happened. It would be stranger to me in this era for a player to be drafted by a team and finish with that team. That would be pretty rare, pretty incredible for Steph Curry to do that. And if there were going to be a player to do it, it would be Steph Curry. I think one of the greatest players of all time, the greatest shooter of all time, unquestionably, I think. But one of the greatest players of all time, I could definitely see it happening. But I could also see just like a 1 year retirement, kind of thing. How he's already got everything locked up in Golden State. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And he comes to Charlotte for a little ceremonial year.
Yeah, just don't come for 10 days and then go back to Golden State. We
don't want you for 10. No, we don't want you for 10 days. It's not how any of this works.
We'll give him a 10-day contract.
Okay, but make up your mind, David. Do you want it for 10 days or do you not want it for 10 days?
I think you want it for 1 day. I think you want it for 10 days. So whatever you can get. So
all right. Yes. Coming up on this edition of Locked On Hornets, we're going to talk about some rule changes in the G League that could make some exciting rule changes. I gotta pump this up. Some exciting rule changes in the G League that could be coming to the NBA. Something that David and I have been talking about for a long time of wanting to see in the NBA. We'll get to that and much, much more here on Locked On. I'm gonna get my bump together at some point. Here on Locked On Hornets.
You are listening to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Unless Mitch has Buzz on his lap and Buzz is sort of
Santa style. I like it.
Oh yeah, or ventriloquist.
Well, let's how much ventriloquist are we going? I don't think anything, or I don't want to go that much. Whoa, yeah, I don't want to go with ventriloquist. Let's go. I like the Santa style a little bit more. Either one is creepy.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. I'm Doug Branson, joined again by David Walker. David, exciting news out of the G League. The Elam ending is coming to the G League to decide overtime games. Now, if you don't know what the Elam ending is, let me explain it to you very quick. You might have seen it in the NBA All-Star game. So
this is horrible branding, by the way. This is like the Democratic Party. They've got to get some people out here to give it a better name than the Elam ending. God bless you, Mr. and Mrs. Elam.
Well, I wonder, because they've been using the Elam ending, which is essentially you set a target score for teams to hit, and that decides the game as opposed to, just the raw score. Yeah. So, and time. Yes. So you set a target score instead of a timed overtime. Now they've been trialing this in the NBA All-Star game, and to honor Kobe Bryant, they set the target score at 24. So instead of the Elam ending, I wonder if there's some kind of,
now we're talking,
branding around Kobe, the Kobe ending. I don't know. We'll have to see what they end up calling it.
It'll be called, the State Farm ending or something horrible like that. But I mean, let's be honest. That's what they're going to brand this thing out. But anyway, go ahead.
So the Elam ending is coming to G League's overtime, and we've seen, David, rule changes that start in the G League, including the rule change that's taking effect in the NBA this year, the transition take foul. We've seen that start in the G League and then make its way to the NBA. Now, to be fair, we've also seen some other radical ideas make its way to the G League and not end up in the NBA. For example, they did, I don't know if they're still experimenting with this, but I know in 2019 they instituted one free throw no matter what. So even if it was a 3-point foul, then you would take one free throw for all 3 points. And it was a way to like speed up the game and stuff like that. And they did not move that to the NBA yet, I guess. But I think after a few years, if you're not going to move it, you're probably not going to move it. But the Elam ending, do you see it eventually making its way to the NBA? Would you like to see it make its way to NBA overtimes?
And no, just so overtimes I think would be the spot, right? They're not. I don't think they're going to do it for full games. And the G League is doing this in overtimes. Are they also doing it in some like? Do they have a midseason tournament or some other? So in
span
of time.
They do some showcase games in Las Vegas in December, and that's when they're going to do no fourth quarter clock. That will be Elam ending in the fourth quarter. And I'm with you. I don't see that. I think, that would be too radical a change to the NBA. I mean, I think it's always going to be 12-minute quarters, but overtime. But in overtime, I could definitely see it. Or you just mentioned sort of mid-season tournaments. There are a lot of talk about a mid-season tournament for the NBA. I could definitely see them bringing that kind of ending to that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. And they've always been, at least under Silver, they've been willing to experiment and try new things. It's definitely good for the All-Star game. I mean, I think that's been a win there. Overtime, maybe a double overtime situation. I don't know. People are so precious with these records, though, and changing anything, whether it's shortening the season by games or certainly the time of games. So I don't see it affecting anything, a regular season game or a standard game from that point. But the G League, that's why the G League is actually the perfect place for this type of stuff.
Now, I know you are someone that is very precious about your time, and you don't like things to take too long, especially in the NBA. I mean, it seems like the fourth quarters, especially the end of these games, can sometimes drag on because of the replays. So do you worry that I know it's not going to be in the fourth quarter, but if they do an Elam ending situation in overtime, that it could take even longer to get to these scores? That would be the
downside. Yeah, that would be the downside, right? Because overtime, you've got what you got. So maybe it'll never happen. I don't know. But if it's a speed up thing, listen, there's a lot of other things we can do to speed up these games. You mentioned replay. You mentioned all the constant complaining. You mentioned, my God, we've got plenty of stuff we can do without shaking up the timing of these games. So Elam ending is cool. Don't you feel like it's definitely still a fringe nerd thing, though, right? Like anyone gets excited about that is an analytics basketball, nerd in a loving way.
Well, no, but I think there's a carnival aspect to it as well. It doesn't feel like it feels sort of goofy to end games like that. But I think it's more interesting than now. Again, I think I don't want to lose the fourth quarter last second shot opportunity, because I think there's something magical about that too. But I've watched it in the NBA All-Star game, and there is a little bit of tension that builds up as they approach that score. Yeah.
That's because there's no inherent tension, right, in the All-Star game. That's why
that's right. It is the only tension in the room. And when you're, as I said earlier this week, sometimes when you're the only package in the room, then you suddenly have the biggest package in the room. I don't know if you've been listening all week, but that was something we discussed. Unfortunately, as we discussed in this episode, Charlotte did not have the biggest package in the room. Cleveland walked into the room and just showed a massive package, a package that I didn't expect anyone to have, much less Cleveland. But they walked in there and they threw it on the table. So that happened. That's all.
Apparently it did.
David, I almost did it right there. I almost called you Walker. Close. It was close, but I wrenched it back. David, I just want to give you this opportunity at the end of the show here to get anything off your chest about the Charlotte Hornets that you'd like to. So I hope the next time you come on, it's not such a long absence. I don't want to do this again. I want to see you every week.
I know. I want to get back to chopping it up. I think, there was a lot of anticipation for this next season and to see what it holds. And I think this has been the most out of the blue, crazy, awful, just disparaging offseason that I can remember in the Hornets in a long, long time. You started by having a coach, then losing a coach, and then you start by getting a good coach. I will say I like all the media members now who bring up the coaching hire that went awry, and then they say, but they got a good coach. They got a good coach. These people really love Steve Clifford, as do we. But I just think, man,
we love Steve Clifford, don't we, people?
We love him. He's a good man. He's a good people. We just need to get this season started. They've got to get something out on the court. Any more bad press, this Miles thing is going to hang on with them forever. If they can get on the court, get a few wins, Doug, that solves a lot of things. But you got LaMelo Ball. We just got to stay with LaMelo. You got to, give him basically whatever he wants. let him do whatever he wants, and try and put some pieces around him. I'm ready for the season. I'm cautiously, I won't say optimistic, but I'm cautious. But I am ready.
Well, I hope if they're not going to do anything, I mean, they've obviously not done anything, but I hope the team comes to terms with that at some point and shifts gears into player development and shifts gears into, I don't think, look, you're not going to be able to convince Steve Clifford to tank or anything like that. That's not going to be a reality, but I don't think that they're going to field a roster that's going to compete anyway. I think that's going to take care of itself. So now we're talking about maybe competing for the NBA draft top spot for Wembanyama or for Scoot Henderson, who's going to play for G League Ignite this season. G League Ignite is going to get a full 50 game schedule, I believe. They're going to play a full schedule in the G League this year. So a lot of opportunity to see Scoot Henderson, who looks to be one of the high draft picks in this upcoming draft. So we'll keep an eye on it all here on Locked On Hornets. Thanks again for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. Thanks again for David Walker for filling in for Walker Mail. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza. David, do you say extravaganza or do you say extravaganza?
Ganza.
I'm a Gonza guy. To get ready for the NFL season, the local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Have a great weekend. Go Hornets. Go America. Let's swarm Charlotte.